Hi, I'm Jeff Walters, and welcome to The Minutes. And thanks for listening today. It's great to have you on The Minutes for the week of April the 8th, 2024. This is a City of Thunder Bay podcast. The Minutes takes a look at what happened at Thunder Bay City Council this past week. On this episode, we'll have a rundown of what happened at this week's City Council meeting and an interview with Dan Corbett, the City Forester. We'll talk about trees and the impact of the emerald ash borer and how the city is dealing with it. That's in just a couple of minutes. But first, Council approved a couple of contracts for city infrastructure on Monday night. McKinga Contracting will rebuild sewer and water lines in the Simpson Street and Dease Street areas this year. The $5.4 million contract includes rebuilding roads, curbs, sidewalks, water lines, sewer lines, and streetlights. The work will take place on Dease Street between May and Simpson Streets. Work will also occur on Simpson Street between Dease Street and Cherry's Corner. Some of the current water and sewer lines underground are over 100 years old. The work also includes the removal of some lead water lines. Also, Council approved a $5.5 million contract with Tyrannus Contracting for repaving a number of roads this year. The contract also includes some spot repairs to sidewalks, curbs, and street lighting. The work will take place on sections of Arthur Street, Edward Street, the Harbour Expressway, Maple Ward Road, Wasco Drive, and Onion Lake Road. Paving will also take place on Freeman Drive, Frontenac Bay, Isabella Street, Oxford Street, Summit Avenue, and Whitney Street. Other jobs will take place on Algoma Street, Arundel Street, Carrick Street, Hewitson Street, Isabel Street, and Red River Road, as well as some drainage and grading work will take place on Alice Avenue before that road gets a surface treatment. Finally, Pete's Backhoe Service will do just under $1 million of work on pedestrian bridges. The Brent Street, Blanchard Street, and County Park pedestrian bridges will be replaced. WSP will provide contract administration services for that bridge work. That's worth about $123,000. Council received an update on the emerald ash borer strategy this week. In 2016, Council then decided to have half of the city's ash trees treated with an insecticide to combat the insect. There were about 6,500 ash trees on boulevards and in parks at that time. In 2021, changes were made so that 850 trees across the city will receive the treatment until 2030. In the past couple of years, more and more of the insects are being found across the city, which was expected. Last year, 450 ash trees were cut down on city property, while 850 trees were planted across the city. The goal is to continue to cut down ash trees, but to have other trees in different stages of maturity spread throughout a neighborhood where ash trees were dominant. All of the wood from the cut trees is brought to Thunder Bay Pulp and Paper and burned in the biomass boiler. The city will continue to plant new trees across the city to help speed up the canopy replacement from the trees that need to be cut. We'll hear more about the emerald ash borer from City Forester Dan Corbett in just a couple of minutes. Council approved a new agreement to operate the current river commercial dock. The city will operate the dock for at least 5 years and will enter into contracts with commercial fishing operators who are based at the facility. The city was told back in 2015 that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans was looking at divesting the dock. Since then, the DFO has spent about $800,000 to rebuild the facility. The work should keep the dock in good condition for 25 to 30 years. The city will have existing park staff look after the dock, which is located at Fisherman's Park. There were some questions at Council on Monday night about liability, and Council went into closed session to get that information that they requested. Thunder Bay Transit will adjust how it operates the Mainline 1 route. The route, which runs from Westfort to Current River, will be split into 3 separate routes starting on May the 19th. The route is currently 44 kilometers in length, round trip, in comparison to an average 19-kilometer round trip length for other routes. There is also varying demand along the route, with the busiest section between City Hall and Water Street terminals with 52 boardings an hour. The Westfort section has 31 boardings an hour, while the Current River portion of the route has 28 boardings an hour. Transit says they are changing how the route operates, and it will allow for better management, especially during rush hours when the bus can be delayed in the busiest portion of the route. The new route scheduling will see the creation of the Current River 17 route and the Westfort 18 route. Both will follow the exact same routing as the Mainline does now. The start and stop times for bus service will not change, but there are some adjustments on the frequency of buses in the morning and daytime for the Westfort and Current River areas. The changes will allow transit to reduce the number of buses on the road from 5 to 4 to serve these areas. The 19 hours of daily service will then be reallocated to other routes, and that will help alleviate overcrowding. Council voted to ask administration to bring back a list of transit operator safety initiatives in a year. In October of 2023, administration gave Council an overview of transit operator safety items after the union representing transit employees made a deputation to Council. At that time, administration said it would need up to a year and a half to analyze data and determined the impact of a number of safety measures, including education, training, and programs and procedures. The report will go back to Council in just under a year from now. City Council voted to create an education session for councillors after requesting administration look into possible training for Councillor Rajni Agarwal. On March the 18th, Council received a report from the Integrity Commissioner, noting that Councillor Agarwal had violated the Council Code of Conduct. The Integrity Commissioner recommended removing Agarwal from the Fort William BIA board. Instead, Council chose to look at training options and conflict resolution courses. In a memo to Council, City Clerk Krista Power said she reviewed training options and found that a confidential education and training session focused on specific concerns and opportunities would be the best option for all councillors. Power wrote that in consultation with the Integrity Commissioner, administration recommends a custom session be delivered for Council. Councillor Agarwal would be required to attend the session. A session for all councillors would make sure that Council has the same information, the same tools, and the greatest opportunity for success as a team for the remainder of the term, Power wrote. The session would focus on conflict resolution, responding to challenging behavior, collaboration, and making sure that municipal obligations are councillors' primary focus. The session will be led by a specialist, not the Integrity Commissioner or the Clerk's office. And that's a wrap as to what happened at Council this week. For more information on anything that happens at Council, please visit our website, thunderbay.ca/council. It's killed millions of ash trees in North America, and it's really difficult to stop. The emerald ash borer is an invasive species that has made its way to Thunder Bay. It's been here for a few years, and its arrival is evident through the destruction of ash trees throughout Thunder Bay. The species can't be eradicated. That's virtually impossible. But this plan is to try and preserve the urban canopy as much as possible. Last night, City Councilors got an update on the plan to deal with the emerald ash borer. Dan Corbett is the city forester here in Thunder Bay. Dan, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
So why is there so much concern over the emerald ash borer?
The emerald ash borer is an invasive species, and that means that our tree species, for example, aren't in a position to be able to fend it off. It was first located in southern Ontario. We believe that it came in on shipping containers. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency conducts inspections on packages and pallets that are coming in from overseas. However, they believe that some beetles got through, and then it was found in southern Ontario. So the problem becomes if the trees aren't adapted for it, then we end up with rapid spread and nothing to control the beetles necessarily because they're voracious feeders. So the big concern from our standpoint as a municipality is that we had initially, when the beetle was found, there was a population of around 6,500 ash trees that were used as boulevard trees throughout the city, and some in parks as well. And it's a tree species that grows well here. It's very similar to our native black ash species, and there are also some white ash around here. But it was a very common landscape tree. So there were around 6,500 ash trees throughout the city, and there's nothing to stop this beetle. So the very best science and background was found from across the province and throughout Canada and across the United States, some in Europe. And they tried to find a strategy that would be able to address it in southern Ontario first, because they had the infection first. And they found that it is indeed next to impossible to eradicate. So there are no controls, and if we have 6,500 trees throughout the city that are potentially over sidewalks or near city infrastructure or could become public hazards, and they could very well decline very quickly, and then we would have a surplus of trees that need to be removed in order to eliminate public hazard and then replaced with other tree species. which is what the strategy identifies. That's what's been going on since 2016 when the strategy was established. And we are following the strategy as expected. Some people may have seen in the media over the last couple of years, in particular in Winnipeg, people were commenting that the emerald ash borer didn't arrive as they thought that it would. So we weren't experiencing a non-arrival. We knew that we had it in Thunder Bay, but it didn't spread to the level that we had anticipated it might. And it just hadn't had time to establish, potentially due to our climate. But we knew that it was here. And now the best indications are that geographically, 80% of the geography of Thunder Bay has emerald ash borer beetles. And the high concentrations of beetle catches that we had in our indicator trapping told us that it could be a year where we're experiencing a high mortality due to beetles. And then, of course, there were some reports that came in early winter for us, indicating that trees that had otherwise been in good health going into the fall were starting to show signs of decline. And that was along the Woodward Trail. And when we investigated those concerns from the public, we found that indeed there was a heavy infestation along that trail. And we need to stay on top of the work in order to not have to try and remove a very high number of trees in a very short period of time or create public hazards.
So I know that, as you said, this is the update on the plan. We've had something going on since 2016. Obviously, there's some tree removals as you've spoken of. Is there anything else that you or your department can do to kind of deal with this invasive species?
Yeah, within the plan, we identified initially that there were 1,700 trees that were going to be injected with an insecticide called triazine. And in 2021, the city decided that they were going to change the injection numbers down to 850, so half. And those are spread out across the city. So those are the largest, most healthy, best specimens in the right location that we may try and prolong the lives of those trees. In the meantime, we've been conducting strategic removals throughout the city in order to potentially slow down the impacts from the beetle when the population begins to increase at an exponential rate, as it is potentially now, and try and position ourselves so that the continuity of ash throughout the city is lower so that it makes it a little bit more difficult. But history in Southern Ontario has proven that doesn't necessarily work, the tree removals. But we're still committed to injecting 850 trees. They are the same trees that are marked. Residents recognize them by a green dot that's on the tree. And we're still continuing to inject those trees every 2 years.
I'm lucky. I have one of those trees on my boulevard. I guess maybe I'm unlucky too, because at some point that tree will probably have to come down.
It could. At the same time, where we have diversities of winters, we have some winters that are very hard. That may help us, as it has, taken a long time for the beetles to get to a high population. We may be able to save some of those trees. We're not sure. Residents can do some things to try and prolong the health of the tree so that it isn't as susceptible to the beetles. So trees that are stressed, for example, tend to attract the beetle, where trees that are not stressed don't attract the beetle as readily.
Okay, so you almost want the healthier the tree, the better chance it has of making it.
Absolutely, and really it's the healthy trees that are injected. The trees that are not injected, we can anticipate that those will need to be removed between now and 2030. That was the target that was set out in the original EAB management strategy.
So what are people going to see going on in different areas of town? I'm thinking, if you have a residential street, for example, full of ash trees, are you just going to go along one day if they're not healthy and just take them down by one, or is that kind of the strategic removal process and plan that you have in place?
Yeah, part of that has been strategic removals up until now. There should be no surprise to people. What we do is provide a notification, usually in mailboxes, knock on some doors, talk to residents that are outside, and let them know that there's going to be a number of ash removals in their community. For efficiency purposes, we do try and group ash removals together so that we would go into a community, say, for example, Jumbo Gardens, and we would remove a number of trees over a short period of time in there. So there would be notifications that go out to neighbors. So people, there should be some discussion about it beforehand. If there is a tree in front of your house that is an ash tree that does not have a green mark on it, you may receive something in the mailbox. Then once we're in those areas, the way that we do it tactically is to actually go into the community and to try and remove some of the trees every year so that we gradually replace the canopy with a diversity of species so that we're not running into this situation again when another vector comes along that could, harm the canopy throughout the city.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, so all the trees that you're taking down, there's replacements coming shortly afterwards as well?
Correct. Especially with the emerald ash borer strategy, the idea was to replace the canopy as best we can with a diversity of species. We always focus on trying to get the right tree in the right place at the right time. And in this case, where we can inspect throughout the communities where we know there's a high concentration of ash, and we can target 50 or 100 trees that are going to be removed in that community and plant those areas as soon as possible. So our plan moving forward is to notify people, to begin conducting removals, usually in the fall, and then try and plant on the boulevard in front of the home where the tree was removed. In some cases, we can't because of underground infrastructure or because there are other factors that are influencing whether or not that's the right place to put a tree. And in those cases, what we do is plant that tree in the nearest park or parkette so that we can try and repopulate the wards to the same level that they were and provide improvement as well. So we're generally exceeding the number of trees removed in our planted trees.
So Dan, if people really want to, help protect the canopy, and what can they do to try and kind of maintain the canopy or maybe improve the canopy that we have?
There are some times that we have, I guess I want people to understand that we have trees that normally live in the forest that are living in a very harsh environment. They've often been planted along boulevards where they're living in what would normally be called clean fill as opposed to soil. And they're right beside the road where they might be impacted by salt, and they certainly have a hard time getting enough water. So if residents want to help to maintain the urban canopy or help us to grow the urban canopy, there are a few things that they certainly could do to help us out. So one is certainly to water the trees. If you can just set on a hose and let the water run for 15 minutes on a really hot day, that could be the difference between a tree being stressed or not stressed during that drought period. Not parking vehicles underneath trees on the roots is important. There are some places where people park off the road, but they happen to be parking on the roots. If it's possible not to do that, that would be great. Certainly people drilling into trees or attaching things to trees, it's a possible opening where we could have disease or infection get into those trees. And we do notice a lot of people that put mulch around the base of the tree, which we greatly appreciate because it keeps the grass down, which keeps lawnmowers away from the roots of the tree, which is great. It also holds moisture in the soil and gives the soil life, some protection from the sun, which is fantastic. However, if residents could keep the mulch or bark 6 inches away from the stem, that keeps the moisture away from that trunk. And what we find is that trees that have bark right up against the trunk are really in a stress situation because there's a potential of root rot, and they're really not meant to have bark build up around the base of the tree that way. So if they could do that, that would be very helpful for the canopy.
So, if people are wanting to know how are we going to deal with this, or what's the best way to deal with the emerald ash borer, kind of what would you tell them?
We do require the public's assistance to report to us when they start to see signs of decline in ash trees. We're working with the corporate communications branch to try and identify, at what point do we want things to be reported through dispatch regarding ash trees. We know that they're all going to show signs of decline, but it's not until they're actually a hazard that we can spend the resources to go out there and inspect them and potentially remove them if it's an appropriate time. There is a high potential that we could have a large number of removals for public safety purposes. So we really need to work with the public and make sure that the public are well informed about what they need to see. We need to let the public know through our website and through other communications what they're looking for when it is generally identified as a hazard. And then we can spend the allocated resources to go out there and inspect the tree, do the proper removals, etc. But if we're spending time and resources inspecting trees that are not in advanced stages of decline or are not a hazard or even close, or if we're asked to go and inspect in areas that are not a public safety concern, then that's diverting fairly limited resources away from the areas that we need to go and address because there are hazards throughout the city.
And what are some of the things that people can kind of look for themselves to determine, is this tree a problem or is it a safety hazard? What can they be looking for?
In the case of ash, the signs that you'll see for decline is certainly this time of year, we're going to see that some trees will not leaf out. We'll start to see branches that are becoming brittle. We'll start to see bark starting to either have flecking on it, where you can see that a woodpecker has come along and started looking for the beetles under the bark. And then eventually that bark will start to fall off. In terms of signs of actual hazard, it is best to have a certified arborist look if there's something that's of concern. However, a good guideline is if a branch is larger than, say, for example, someone's wrist, and it were to fall from a high distance, that is a risk that we would like to eliminate if it's a risk to the public. So if it's on city property, then people can call dispatch and say there's a branch that is as large as my wrist hanging dead up in a tree, and I believe that it needs to be addressed, and we'll send someone out to have a look at it. If it's on private property, the suggestion is the same, except they need to contact a private contractor who's an ISA certified arborist who has the background to be able to make that call, and then we'll assume the liability if they happen to be wrong.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Dan, appreciate you coming in today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan Corbett is the city forester in Thunder Bay. He joined me here in the Minutes studio. A big thanks for listening to the Minutes this week. Of course, if you want more information about City Council, agendas, or minutes, just visit thunderbay.ca/council. If you want to listen to past episodes or provide any feedback, visit our website at thunderbay.ca/theminutes. You can also find the Minutes wherever you get your podcasts. That includes Apple, Google, and Amazon podcasts, along with Spotify, plus our website as well. I'm Jeff Walters. Thanks for listening this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Make it a great day.